guys, I couldn't be more excited for today's conversation and today's guest. We have Beth Gulotta on the podcast. Beth, welcome to Seeing Other People.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I always love the opportunity to be in the other seat. So thank you so much for having me.
I feel the same way. I'm glad you said that. I actually enjoy being interviewed more than I enjoy interviewing. And maybe there's some psychological thing about that, how we love talking about ourselves, but I feel the same way. So I'm glad that you get this time to be on
Well,
the other
thank you for
side.
giving me this time. I honestly don't love talking about myself as a therapist. I'm used to listening to other people, but
Yeah.
I think for me, podcasting is so new and there's this pressure to do justice to everybody's stories. So I think I put that pressure on myself, but I do like being in this seat. The pressure feels a little off.
Well, I wanna talk about that. That's actually something I was excited to have a conversation about. First and foremost, you are a licensed mental health counselor. You are the owner and founder of NYC Therapeutic I can't speak. NYC Therapeutic Wellness, and you are the host of the podcast Quiet the Clock, which I think every single person listening to this would benefit from listening to. There's
Oh.
so much you're doing such important and incredible work. But I do wanna talk about as a therapist, you are opening up in a public way and sharing parts of yourself and your story. And I feel like historically that was either taboo or somewhat frowned upon, but it's becoming more of a common thing now. And I'm curious what that transition was like for you or what led you to start doing it and how that experience has been.
Ooh, I love that question so much, and thank you. I think you're doing incredible work as well. Everybody should be listening to your podcast too. It's so amazing. I love that question, and what I will say is a few things. I think therapy is moving in the right direction in which therapists aren't a blank slate anymore. And I think when I was in grad school and newly practicing, that was kind of the understanding of our role was like we don't use self-disclosure too much or we use it very sparingly. And so I kind of started in that space of like I'm not going to share as much about myself. Using self-disclosure is like a skill. But as things have progressed, like especially with social media and a lot of therapists on social media and sharing on social media, like we're humans too, we're people too, and our stories can be very helpful. And prior to starting this podcast, I did a podcast with my sister years ago, and I wasn't comfortable sharing. I was still in the space of like, if my clients are listening, what are they going to think? And I was really I really grappled with that and I was really uncomfortable. But I think with the progression of therapy and sort of therapists being more people and not such a blank slate and the importance of this topic, I had to share. And that was a major consideration was that, you know, the podcast was born out of my own experience and then hearing everybody else's experience. And I just felt like there was so much more value and relatability if I were to be vulnerable and open up and share my story. So that kind of trumped everything. And the response I've gotten is really, really great. The connections I've made, like connections with you and other people that have been on here are incredible. So yeah, I think it's important. It was really important for me to share the story as a therapist and helping other women navigate 30s and egg freezing and all the things that we talk about on the podcast.
Absolutely. I think it's beautiful and inspiring that you decided to take that leap and test it out. And especially with such important topics like this, like I feel like there's so much societal pressure as a woman to be hitting certain milestones at certain ages and to be quote unquote like moving forward with the path that you didn't even choose for yourself, or maybe it's not what you want, or maybe you don't know how you feel about it. And so I think I'm sure that's what a lot of your clients are coming to you to talk about. So being able to sit there and hear from you like, "Hey, I was in your position and here's what I did and here's how I'm doing now." I think it's so helpful and probably makes them feel so much less alone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the clients that I've worked with, and now at the point where I am in my career, I've worked with for 5 or 6 years. So it's a really, really strong therapeutic relationship. So I feel even more comfortable to self disclose there, even if no one's listening to the podcast or know that the podcast is out there. Um, there are these moments in session where it feels relevant and helpful to share. Hey, I've been there, or hey, I didn't meet my partner to 34, or hey, I froze my eggs at 37 or hey, I got pregnant at 39. I think they do find it so reassuring and not alone. And it's like, not only do I get you as a therapist, but I get you as a person because I have been there. And really, a lot of the intention of the podcast is just to sort of pay it forward in that I felt so alone. I felt so stuck in these narratives of like, I'm behind, I'm not going to meet anybody. And I think there's really a great opportunity to not live in those narratives and really get to enjoy your 30s, even if you don't meet the milestones when people are telling you you should meet the milestones.
Yeah, and I feel like everyone I've talked to, I've had so many conversations with people who were like, "Yeah, when I was in my 20s, when I was in my early 30s, or at this age, I really so badly wanted to meet my person." But I'm so glad that it didn't happen until my late 30s, until my early 40s, my late 40s, because I ended up becoming the best version of myself, or I ended up figuring out exactly who I wanted to be during those years. And had I met somebody at that time, maybe it wouldn't have worked, or maybe I would have outgrown them very quickly.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think you made a really good point when we originally connected that, even though our audience is maybe more geared toward 30s, 40s, like the narratives start building in your 20s, right? So it applies to anyone, like this idea of, when these things should happen, or you're in a space of comparison and you're looking at what other people are doing or what milestones they're meeting. So I think it can apply to any decade. I think that 30s like amps up the pressure and expectation more so. I think there's more permission in your 20s. But if you hold that narrative internally, it doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, or 40. It's whenever you're telling yourself you should have had these things or met the person or had the babies. So I
Yeah.
think it all applies. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure. I like what you said earlier too. Like, I think what happens is that we don't stop to understand if we actually really want these things when we're told we're supposed to want these things. And because these are, societal expectations that are long standing and well ingrained, we're never really taught to be like, hey, wait, do I want that because I want that? Or is someone telling me to want that? And I have a lot of clients, unsure about motherhood and then blaming themselves or thinking something's wrong with them because they don't know. And I'm like, you don't need to know. Who told you needed to know? So
You don't
I,
need to know, and you don't need to do something just because it's what you thought you would do or what is quote unquote expected. Like, it is actually a choice, and you're allowed to make that choice.
I know. I think when we get too caught in the expectations or sort of long-standing, ideas that womanhood is synonymous with motherhood, like if you don't want a child, something's wrong with you. Those two are so intertwined. But I think, with progression and certain work that people are doing to change narratives, that's shifting. To your point earlier, like I think it's important that everyone determine their own timelines. I think about this all the time. Like, if I married the person I was with in my 20s, oh my God, what a disaster. Or if I even married the person that I had a relationship end around 30, 31. If I was with that person, train wreck, right? So I think it's
Mhm.
sort of looking at the value of your own timing and understanding that it will all, whatever is meant for you will come. And that's really hard when you're in this space of like, scarcity or doubt or really having a hard time managing the uncertainty. And I look back now, and meeting Rob at 34 was right on time. Having my son at 40 was right on time. And there's so much I learned and so many ways that I grew that allowed me to make space for someone like Rob. Like, he's not someone I would have ever dated before. And, I kind of like did my own work and reflection to like see that person. So I think that's an important reminder is that, there's value and there's reason and there's meaning to why you're not hitting those milestones yet. And I think you've shared very openly about your relationship journey, and you had some bumps along the road, but it sort of shaped you into this person who you
Yeah.
are now, and that also invited space in for your fiance.
Yeah, and I wish I could, more than anything, I wish I could go back in time and shake myself, or like write a letter now to my past self and be like, It's all gonna work out. Like, it is going to be okay." And you don't have to sit there every single day thinking, "What's wrong with me? Why does nobody want to love me or accept me or even get past date 3 with me?" Like, "Why won't anybody commit to me?" You don't have to question these things, because right now, like, you have so much to offer, not just men, but the world and your friends and your job and yourself and your passions. And there's so much more to you than your relationship status. And I feel like it's almost like a thinking about Spotify Wrapped. It's like, if if it could actually have given me a tally of how many times I thought these things or said these things to myself or stared at my phone waiting for a guy to text me back, and it's like, I had so much else going for me, and I could have
I
been
know.
enjoying, and it's so sad to think about.
Yeah, I feel that same sentiment and I experience that same thing. And that's part of, why I'm passionate about these type of conversations and this type of work is to remind women that, you can enjoy the journey too. I had an incredible, 30s, but prior to meeting Rob, there was a lot of sadness and being alone. And I know this time of year with the holidays, it can be really hard. I struggle too being single. And while I had a lot of happy moments, there were also a lot of low moments. And same as you, if I could go back to that version of myself, just say, live it up, like enjoy it, enjoy being single, enjoy like coming and going as you please. Like this season will end and you will miss it. But it can be so hard when you're in the moment to be mindful to change the narrative and be talking to yourself in a different way. So I think that's something I certainly want to pay forward is like enjoy the journey. And the other thing is, you know, just because you meet the person and have the baby doesn't mean everything is magically better and great
Mhm.
and amazing. So it's like
Say it louder. Shout it from the rooftops.
then you just have another set of challenges, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't solve anything. So we live in this space of waiting for these things, thinking it's going to solve are or fill the gaps or fill the voids, and it's not necessarily true. Yeah, if you meet the right person, they add so much value to your life as long as it's a securely attached healthy relationship. But then there's things like compromise and sacrifice and a certain loss of independence that you have before, and in a very respectful way. I would never just get on a plane and be like, peace out, Rob. It's like you got to plan for those things and you
Right.
got to be considerate of the other person. So it doesn't it's not like this magic wand that like once you have these things, everything is amazing and great.
I wholeheartedly believe that getting a boyfriend would solve all of my problems and make me happy.
You did.
I did, and I can confirm that is incredibly false.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's hard. You put all your eggs in that basket, and especially like if you're zoned in on that being the thing, and when you get it and it doesn't happen, that's a huge disappointment. And one thing you said earlier about like asking ourselves the question of like, why doesn't it go through? Why don't I get a third date or whatever? I think that if we're asking those questions in the right way to gain more understanding of our own patterns or how we show up dating, that is healthy. If we're asking ourselves those questions in a way of like, what's wrong with me? Why does someone not like me? Then that's not helpful. And that's very harmful to our sense of self and self worth. But if you're kind of being reflective about, okay, like how am I showing up here? Am I being vulnerable? Am I choosing the wrong people? Like, I think there's value in asking those questions in a way that is productive and helpful.
Absolutely. I wanna get into more of your story and how to kind of combat that feeling of comparison, but before we do that, I have a wonderful group of male listeners, and I would love to take this time to kind of have you explain to them, or what do you think men might not understand, but should understand or should try to understand or should want to understand about what women go through and why we feel these things?
I'm only laughing because Shelly and I just had this conversation offline, and I think that there is so much that men don't understand that women go through it. I think there's, and to be completely fair, I think there's misunderstanding on both ends. I think that, women don't understand men and men don't understand women. And I think
Facts.
that is just a horrible equation for everyone out there in the dating world. I think that vulnerability is lacking on both ends. I think that we as women can be more open and men certainly, I think men have a lot to learn and I hate to generalize, but in terms of like communication, expression, vulnerability, um, what should men understand? That's a very good question. Um,
Because they don't, I'm sure men feel so many different types of pressures. I know that they do, but they don't feel this clock ticking pressure to settle down and meet your person and start a family the way that we do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, that's interesting. When we recorded last week, we recorded with a male who's a coach, like a dating coach for men, and I asked him the same question, like, do men understand our clock? Like, do men understand, especially as we're starting to get into later 30s, like that there is really a biological clock? And he said that they do understand. I'm not so sure. I'd be curious to hear from your male listeners how much they know. I think what they also might not know is the emotional weight that is for us women. And I can speak for myself in my own experience that when I was feeling that weight, it colored everything in my relationship. Like I just, things I would never get upset about, like I would get upset about because it all sort of just boiled down to this root, like insecurity and uncertainty about whether or not I would have children. So I would get more curious about what's really going on with women because for men, like it's probably bigger than, you know, you didn't put the Tupperware back right, or like I think for women, it always comes down to something bigger than the little things that it manifests into. So I would say maybe ask, like, get curious of like, okay, you got upset about this thing, but is there something more to that? Um, and certainly, I think what's hard too is that there's a lot as women that we don't understand about our like the egg freezing process and our biological clock. And so, you know, I don't expect men to know that, but we should be learning and then sharing that with the men in our life or the people that you're out there dating.
Yeah. I also think one interesting almost push I would give for men, if you're single and dating women in their late 20s, their 30s, their 40s, ask them, be open, have open, honest, vulnerable conversations about timeline. Like we all are thinking about it. So why sit there having to make assumptions and guess what the other person is thinking or planning? Why not just talk about it? And then you
Yeah.
can very quickly learn if you're even on the same page or not.
Yeah, again, there's just this, I think on both ends, there's this lack of vulnerability. I think for a lot of women, at least the women I've worked with, there's still this desire to be reassured by the man first, to be reassured that they have interest first before they're going to express interest. So before they're going to be vulnerable, before they're going to say that they like them, before they're going to say let's go on another date. So there is still, I think, this expectation or desire for men to validate or reassure first. And that can be hard because it puts responsibility completely on the man. And maybe I always try to remind my clients there's another human on the other side of the table there with their own insecurities, doubts, etc. um, but yeah, I agree with you. I think having a conversation is so important, and being really clear and transparent about what you want soon on, especially if you're in a place where your clock is ticking and you do want those things. I had a client that I was working with who was on the fence about motherhood. She's still not really sure, and she ended up going out with a guy that was like a hard no on kids. And so we explored that. I said, "Well, listen, if you still want that as an option, do you think it's best to date someone that's very clear on that not being it, an option for them?" And so we talked through that and, kind of decided that she should date people that are maybe more in the same place of her. And so that's something like this guy was very upfront on, and we processed it. And even though she's unsure, she's like, I do want to date someone or like get to know somebody that potentially might want. So I think on both ends, like it's very important for people to be clear on what they want and what they're looking for.
Yeah. And to your point, it's important to take the time to figure out what you want and what
Yes.
you're looking for.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just like closing our eyes and walking through and like pointing and being like, okay, like this one.
Yeah, I do a lot of work like that with my clients to get really clear on what they're looking for. We do a lot of like value inventory to see what they value and what they want in somebody else. We take a relationship inventory. So we'll look back at all previous relationships to start to identify, attachment styles or patterns, or, what went well, what didn't go well. Did you like this kind of dynamic? Okay, let's look for that. And really getting a clear vision, and not in the way of like he's got to have this and that and that. It's like, does this person want a family? Is this person close to their family? I'm close to my family. I want someone that's close to their family. So yeah, that you're not out there dating blindly, that you have some
Yeah,
sort of like roadmap.
absolutely. Let's talk about Rob.
Yeah, okay. You would love this.
When did Beth and Rob meet?
Beth and Rob met when I met him at 34 years old. So at that time I'd probably been single for 3 to 4 years. And it's really interesting the timing that we met because I finally got to this place of like feeling really good about where I was at. And it was a constant fluctuation of like, I love my life. It is great. And it was, my early 30s were great. But there was the moments, like I was saying earlier, where it's like, I'm alone. I'm never going to meet anybody. And right before meeting Rob, I was like, damn, life's pretty good. Like I own this little bedroom condo that's mine. I have a great group of friends. Like I can take myself to dinner if I want. I felt really genuinely, authentically good where I was. And I think while prior to that, I could say all those things, I didn't feel it as deeply as I did before I met Rob. And then I'm not even kidding you, like 3 weeks later, I met him. I'm like, damn it. I was like, couldn't I just live in that space for like a little bit longer? But I think the timing was meant to be because I think before that, I had my own patterns of dating and people that I chose. And, I think had I met him even a month or two earlier, like I just wouldn't see him. I just wouldn't see him in a way that was like a viable option. And I think that happens for a lot of people. I think, you know, probably so many good men cross women's path, but maybe they haven't done the work or not understood their patterns or really like reflected on what they're actually looking for. And like all these people miss us.
Yeah.
So I feel very lucky that I had kind of that moment before meeting Rob because I think it allowed me to see him clearly.
I'm curious what you would say or what advice you would give. I have a friend who she is in her early 30s. She has gone through some pretty tough and tumultuous relationship experiences in the past. She's done a lot of work. She's in therapy. She really has like gotten herself back to a great place. And she either continues to meet men who completely like, screw her over, or like they'll
Mm,
tell her they like her and it's going great and they're showing up. And then on the 10th date, they're like, nah, I'm not looking for anything serious. Or she has started to meet these really wonderful guys. And for some reason, she can't get herself there, and she find it's I don't know if that she's, like, finding things that she's not attracted to, and it's okay. I say to her, like, "It's okay, like, just because they're a good person doesn't mean that they're your person or that you have to be attracted to them," but she is very hard on herself for
mm,
feeling like, "Well, here's this wonderful, great guy who has so many things I want, like, what's wrong with me that I can't want to be with
mm.
him?"
I wonder, and you said she's in therapy, but I would be curious about how much attachment work she's done because it sounds like when there is a option or a person that is available, she sort of her avoidant attachment is activated. And so
Mhm.
maybe there's still some fear for her around commitment. Um, and that's just off the very little that you're telling me, but
Yeah.
right at the top of mind, a sort of attachment comes to me, right? And so what it's so funny. I had a very similar client, and I don't know if you've seen this like meme on Instagram, it's forever ago, but it's like a wave and the girl's running away from the wave. And it's like when an actual available good person, you say you want a relationship and then someone
Yeah.
presents themselves and you're like running away. And so we would kind of joke that like she runs away from the wave. So I would encourage her to just sort of explore attachment style a little bit more because a lot of people can be both anxious and avoidant. And when we find somebody that is maybe securely attached or emotionally available, it activates our avoidant. And so we're like, not interested, like too nice, like he's great, but I'm not like we can rationalize anything.
Yeah, it's also probably the fear of like, well, if and I remember feeling this way too, like if I start to have feelings for this person, all I know is this ends with me getting my heart broken.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, we're constantly, and this is the importance, I think, of therapy and reflection and just working on yourself in any way that feels comfortable for you. But, we're always trying to protect ourselves, right? We're
Yeah.
always trying to, implement some sort of like coping mechanism, protective mechanism so we don't get hurt. And I think that's why there's this lack of vulnerability. And like, yes, it hurts to get hurt, but it also hurts to be so closed off and it's
Yeah.
so isolating. So sure, like if her experience has always been like this ends and I get hurt, she's probably trying to protect herself.
Yeah. You mentioned your last relationship before Rob ended like 3 or 4 years before. So you were like 30, 31 when you became single.
Mhm.
Why and how did that relationship end?
Oh boy. Oh my God, no one's asked me that. Okay.
We don't have to go there.
No, we can go there.
Okay.
Absolutely 100%. Which is really interesting because I just recently connected, I think, my fertility journey, even before like Rob and I getting on the same page and getting pregnant or egg freezing at 37, to this relationship, sort of indirectly, but I never thought about that in this way. So my relationship before Rob was this guy Frank, and Frank and I were like best friends since I was 13 or 14 years old, like very close friends. And then Frank got really sick. Frank was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he was not supposed to survive that. And I spent a year in the hospital with him, like sleeping there, going back and forth. And a relationship did not start then, but it started after he got well, and he's alive and well, which is incredible and amazing. And so um, we were together for 5 years, and I remember asking him, can you go get your fertility checked? I really don't know how I knew to ask that. I knew that like I wanted to have the option to have children, and at that time I thought it would be with him, and he would never go do it. And I would always bring it up and he would never go. And what I realize now is he was so sick, like the doctors just like jumped right into action, and they didn't tell him freeze your sperm. So I think I knew that. I knew that the doctors hadn't told him to freeze his sperm. And so I think that did impact his fertility, and he didn't want to share that with me. And so that was always kind of like a point of contention in our relationship. Why it ended, um, a couple things. Well, it wasn't necessarily this, but I do want to talk about this because I think a lot of women go through this and it's very common. Because because Frank was so sick, he was on a lot of painkillers for like to
Yeah.
help with chemo, whatever. There was no detox regimen for getting him off those painkillers after being sick. So they were kind of like, cool, you're like cancer free, but now like you're addicted to painkillers. And I didn't know that. That was like hidden from me for most of my relationship. And the only reason I found that out is I did have some friends start to go through that with their partners, like addiction popping up. And I was in grad school for what I do now, and we were learning about pharmaceuticals. And I learned in that class what methadone was. And I didn't know what that was prior to that. And I found the bottle in his car, and I was like, started asking questions. I was like, what is this for? And then I got right on the phone with a girlfriend who was going through the same thing. So that became one thing. And I was ready and willing to stand by him through that and just want to help him through that. And then the other thing is like what I was saying earlier, like the values, just some of the values didn't align. And those parts started to really erode our relationship. And I just didn't see where we got aligned on those things. And I loved him very much, and it was really painful
Mhm.
to walk away from that relationship, but, it informed my list of things I wanted when I left that relationship. And I will say, like, everything I said I wanted in the next person Rob has, so I wouldn't change that experience for anything, and it really allowed me to get more clear on what someone had to offer, whoever was next, what they had to offer.
Do you remember feeling any fear surrounding, leaving this 5-year relationship at that age? Or did you feel like, no, I'm confident, like this isn't it. I'll find my person. I gotta cut the cord in order to move forward.
No, I didn't feel that. That's why I'm like, it was 30, 31 because it just, I don't, and kudos to anyone that like can do the clean break and move on, but that was not what I was able to do. So there was a lot of back and forth. And, you know, our Frank and I were part of this huge group of couples that did everything together. So not only was I losing Frank, I was losing a big, part of my social circle,
Yeah.
and everybody in that circle minus one couple, actually two are not together anymore, but everybody was like getting married and having the kids and buying the house. So there was a lot of grief and sadness there. But I kind of proud of myself because, it eventually did fully end, and did move forward. And I was really clear on that he wasn't going to be able to offer me what I wanted, and a life with him would look a certain way. But it was not a clean break. It was very, very sad. And there was a lot of grief, and not just losing him, but friends, losing the vision of what my future would be. Um, I'm not sure at the time. was I thinking like, "Fuck, I'm 31 and now I'm single again?" I think I was just like just sad. Like, I was just sad and watching all these things happen for other people, and then not being able to relate with some of my best friends because, like, I'm single, you're married with kids, like, you own a home. Like, I just like, there was a lot of loss there.
How did you navigate that comparison or seeing friends, other people in your life taking those next stages, getting engaged, getting married, and you had, been in that relationship and now you're single and you're not meeting somebody, you're not having kids in the near future. What was it like to go through that and how did you, stay sane and
Yeah. No,
not
it
like
was it was it
yeah.
was a roller coaster for sure, but I will say this, and Shelly's gonna laugh when I say this. Bartending at the Ainsworth, where I used to bartend, saved my life, like, because I just met some of the greatest people, the greatest friends. We did a lot of fun things. If anyone is listening, works in that industry or has worked in that industry, the camaraderie there. Like, you're in the weeds with each other. You're up till like 4 or 5 in the morning. Like, I developed some really great friendships, and like I got to live a life that a lot of other people weren't living. I got to travel, and I think I just started to be in a place of gratitude of like all the things that I was getting to do instead of all of the things I wasn't doing. So yeah, that was just it ended up being a really fun time for me. And I got to be with like very cool, fun, creative, smart people. And we traveled all places. We had a lot of fun. There were some tears behind the bar because it was very busy. But yeah, I credit those connections to a lot of it. And I credit, my gratitude and sort of creating this perspective of like all the things I get to do. And that's what I love. Like, I see so much content out there now on social media of people like putting their age and like everywhere they're getting to travel. And I think there's so much value, right? You can kind of make it look any way that you want, and being grateful for the things that you have, grateful for the things that you get to do, and just leaning into that.
Yeah. I think one huge factor that you mentioned is that you found these other people. And I think that is so, so important. If you feel like all of your friends are, moving ahead of you and you're in different life stages and you can't relate to them, that doesn't mean that you don't have to that doesn't mean you have to stop being friends, but you also can take it upon yourself to go meet other people who are doing
Yeah.
the same thing that you're doing and who are on the same path as you, who you can relate to and commiserate with and experience life with.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I feel so grateful to the bar because it was just instantaneous. Like, and I say that because I know that it can be very hard to meet new people. Like, I have especially a lot of female clients that have this desire for more connection and more friends because they might be in that age group where everybody's like moved out of the city, or they're not as available because they're in a relationship, or they're having kids. So it can be really hard to find new people that are kind of in the same life stage, on the same path, but it's so, so, so valuable. And, again, I feel really lucky because, I showed up to work and it was already kind of there for me. So I don't want to devalue how hard it can be to meet new people, but there's so much benefit to it.
What made you bartend at the Ainsworth?
I think I always wanted to bartend. And actually, I tried to bartend in college, but they didn't like hire me to do it. I had no idea how to bartend. I was bartending somewhere else, and I don't know, this might date me a little bit, but Public House was the place that I
Yeah,
bartended.
yeah.
I don't even know if it still exists. And then a family friend of mine was opening the Ainsworth, and I was like, "Well, I want to bartend." And so he hired me, and I think I was there for 5 or 6 years. It's
Wow.
insane money. It's great money. So I was like going through to grad school, and it was really fun. I don't know. I was really, really drawn to it, and I loved it. I loved it.
It sounds fun. I'm like, "Wait, should I, pick up a new side gig?" Ex
Listen, once you get in, it's very hard to get out because the money is very, very good. But the experience for me was even better. It's just Shelly and I want to do a post of like where we started versus where we are, because Shelly and I were like in the trenches together behind the bar, and now we work together on this podcast. So it's all
Oh,
like
I love
full
that. I love
circle.
that so much. Yeah, I have, like, an 11 o'clock bedtime, so I don't know if I'd actually be able to do
Girl,
it,
I'm
but
8:30 now. Put my kids to bed, eat dinner, and I'm asleep.
nice. What time do you wake up?
anywhere between 5 or 6, and if my son sleeps to 7, amazing. But yeah,
I yeah,
life is different.
I have started to think about, like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna have to start waking up at, like, 6 one day when we have kids, and that'll be the rest of my life." It's scary.
Well, I mean, maybe like 8 years. I don't know when they start sleeping in late, but yeah, 6
Yeah,
AM, 6 AM call
yeah.
time.
What do you wish you could tell your younger self?
Ooh. Oh. Yeah, like we were saying earlier, like enjoy it. And I think a lot of the work I do with my clients kind of in the space is just to shift into like life is happening now, live it, enjoy it. Everything is going to work out and everything's going to make sense at some point. And I look back now and it really does. It really really does. And I wish I could have told my younger self, you know, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be more than okay. It's going to be great. It's going to be better than you even imagined. I mean, this relationship I have now is just, Rob is incredible. Everybody has their challenges, but like I have a true solid partner and I couldn't do life without him. And, this is better than I even imagined. So I would just say to her, like, take the flight, go party, be with your girls, enjoy it, take it all in. And the other thing too is like we were saying earlier, like just enjoy where you are now because it'll change and you'll miss parts of that. Like there are times that I'm like, damn, I wish I was like, in my little one bedroom apartment getting ready to go out with my girls and like be able to stay out all night. Like you'll miss those parts and those parts will end. So just try to enjoy it now.
I forget who I was talking to, but I was actually sitting down with a friend of mine days ago. I don't know how I forget who it was, but this was, like, a really, like, meaningful conversation. We were talking about how, like, we're in the good old days now. Who was I
Yes,
talking
you
to?
are. Yes, you are.
Literally, who was I talking to? Um, and it's so true, and I feel like I've noticed this for myself recently where I feel like I spend so much time stressing and complaining, and at the end of the day, if I zoom out, like, life is great. I
Yeah.
have so much to be grateful for and so much to celebrate every day. And yeah, I will have ups and downs. I'll have bad mornings, bad days, bad quarters, whatever. But there's so much for me to be grateful for. There's so much if 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, Alana saw what my life is like
Oh,
now, she would
yeah,
be like, no fucking way. Like,
you
holy
do.
shit. And but on a day-to-day basis, I stress so much, I
I
complain
know.
so much, I'm upset about so many different things, and so I'm really trying to challenge myself to not sweat the small stuff and not look at everything with, like, doom
Yeah,
lenses
I think
over
that
it.
yeah, I think it's like the intentionality of zooming out because I think, especially where we live too, life is so hectic that sometimes we can't zoom out. The thing that I would say and the thing that I say to a lot of my clients is like I think where a lot of the emotional weight comes is like the secondary emotion and the primary emotion being like what we're feeling, like we're frustrated by X. And then the secondary emotion might be anything we add to that, like, well, now like I shouldn't be upset about that. I shouldn't be sweating the small. Like, if you work with me, everyone knows I hate the word should, right? So it's like all the weight and judgment we're adding to what we feel. So like if there's a day that you're overly stressed, I think the best thing you can do for yourself is not get pissed at yourself for being stressed. Like feel it, process it and try to move through it more quickly and there's space for all emotions, but I think again not beating ourselves up about what we're feeling. And I think that goes to say for anyone that might find themselves in the space of still being single and outdated, if there are days that you feel really shitty about it, like for
That's
sure, like
okay.
it's yeah, it's okay. Like the worst thing you can do for yourself is add those narratives that just make it even harder, like something is wrong with me, I'm never going to meet anybody. So I would just say feel what you feel, validate what you feel, but don't like shit on yourself for feeling that way. That's very
100%.
therapeutic advice, by the way. Don't shit on
Don't
yourself.
shit on yourself. No, it's so, so true,
Quote
though.
that.
It really is, like, we're so mean to ourselves.
I know.
We're so cruel to ourselves, and, like, my biggest wish in the world is that we could see each other the way we see each other,
Oh my
or
god, I
that
say
we could see
yeah.
ourselves the way our friends see us, and
Yeah, I say that to my clients all the time. It's like, I have incredible, amazing clients, and it's a little bittersweet because I just made a decision to take a pretty big step back clinically. So I was just wrapping up with a lot of my clients last month, but they are all so amazing, incredible. And I say that same thing. I was like, I want you to see yourself the way that I see you and the
Yeah.
way that other people see you. And just in a lot of sessions, I'm like, please just be nice to yourself. Please just be kind to yourself.
It's so hard, but so
It
important.
it can be hard, yeah, and it's not to say that's easy, but it's to bring awareness to how are we treating ourselves, how are we talking to ourselves, especially as women in this space where dating is hard, you know? For some people, egg freezing is hard, fertility is hard, and so the best thing you can do is kinda just be your best friend through all of those things. It's hard enough as it is, period, like, let's try not to make it even harder for ourselves.
I love that phrase, "Be your best friend." I'm just thinking about, like, yeah, like, when you make plans with your friend, you're like, "Oh, like, what are you in the mood to do?" Like, why don't you ask yourself, like, tonight, like, "Hey, what am I in the mood to do? Am I in the mood to, like, sit on the couch and sulk or, like, put on my old favorite movie or order in food or go take myself out? Like, what am I in the mood to do?" Ask
I love
yourself.
that.
I
Yeah,
love
be your
that.
best friend and
Yeah.
like trying to see yourself clearly the way that your friends do. And if sometimes you can't find a best friend that will actually do that for
Yeah.
you. Sometimes we need people, and I've had that in my life too, where I've had those moments where I'm feeling down or I haven't accomplished enough or whatever I'm saying to myself. And I've literally had a friend like list out all the things and I was like,
Yep.
"Oh, right, like I did all those things." So, try to do it for yourself or get around
Yeah.
people that can do it for you.
I did that for a friend the other day. One of my close friends texted me saying she felt like such a failure, and I instantly wrote up like a 12 paragraph essay. And it was the easiest thing for me to do about like why she's not a failure and why it makes me so sad that she feels that way because here are 27 incredible things that she's accomplished and things that she should be so proud of herself for. And she was just like, "Oh my God, I'm crying. Like, thank
Yeah,
you."
and she's like,
But
she was probably
and
like, "You're right."
it wasn't hard for me to do. It was the easiest thing in the world for me to do because that's how I see her.
I know, I
Yeah.
know. It's so hard for us to do it for ourselves, but
Yeah.
that's a really for anyone that's not in therapy, I mean, a big advocate for therapy, but those are the little things you can try to start to do for yourself. Is just, it's funny too. Like one of the prompts I'll give my clients is like, tell me something you feel proud of, and they'll be like, what? I'm like, okay, well, let's look at why that's hard, and that is sometimes hard. So, if you're listening, think of 5 things that you're proud of.
Yeah. Do it right now.
Do
Do
it
it
right now, right when you finish
right
listening.
now. Okay. Before I let you go, 2
Okay.
final questions.
Okay.
1, what is the best piece of dating or relationship advice you have ever received?
Oh, me personally? Oh, wow, okay. The first, I'm just gonna shoot from what comes right top of mind. I don't know if this qualifies as advice, but it's you'll meet someone when you least expect it, and I hated hearing that, and then when I met Rob, I was like, "Shoot, everybody was right," and I think what people meant like that was, like, take the pressure off, zoom out, live your life, just make space for it, and it will come, and it did. So, I would say that top of my head.
I'm so glad you said that because before I was like, "Should I ask if she believes in that or thinks it's" and I had a feeling that you would align with it because of exactly your story of, like, weeks before and ho like, how your mindset shifted, but
Oh
I
my
love
god,
that.
and honestly, I was annoyed because I was not annoyed, but I was like, "Oh my god, everyone's been saying to me this to me, and they're right, they're so right." So, that would be my
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, I love it. Okay, before I let you go now, last question. Where can everybody find you?
Oh, yay. Okay, so, you mentioned all of this at the top of the podcast, so thank you so much. I am the owner of the group practice NYC Therapeutic Wellness, and while I am not taking new clients, I have an incredible team of therapists that are so, so amazing. So if anyone's listening, you can find us on Instagram, nytherapeutic.com. Oh, nyctherapeuticwellness.com. I should know my own website. And then you can find me at quiettheclock.com, Quiet the Clock Pod on Instagram. Anywhere you can listen to podcasts, I am there.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much for being here. This has been so great. Now that we've like had 3 like back to back long conversations now and like we need to keep having them. I'm
Oh
sad
my God,
that
I'd love to
yeah.
anytime, anytime. Next one we have to do in person. We will plan for
Yes.
what did they say? IRL, in real life.
I crushing it. IRL. Love
Trying to
it.
sound young and hip here. No,
You are
thank you so
succeeding.
much for having me. Thank you for all that you're doing. Your podcast is
Yes.
incredible. I've been telling everybody about it. So I
Thank
look
you.
forward
Likewise.
to more conversations with you.
Me too.